"I have no one in the world," cried the Orphan, the Alpha King. "Now you have an entire kingdom." The wind whispered through the skeletal trees, carrying with it the faint scent of ash and sorrow. The village lay in ruins, its stone houses crumbled and charred, smoke curling into a gray sky. Among the remnants, a lone figure walked slowly, her feet stirring up dust and fragments of shattered lives. She was thin, her hair tangled and dark, and her eyes held the kind of grief that burned quietly but deeply. Her name was Alara, though few had ever spoken it aloud. She had no family, no home, no place in the world. Everything she had loved was gone, the laughter of her parents, the warmth of her small home, the soft voice of her little brother calling her name. All had been stolen in one night of fire and fear. She wandered aimlessly, letting the wind guide her steps. Each ruined house told her a story, and each story reminded her of her loneliness. "I have no one in the world," she whispered to the gray sky, her voice thin and fragile. Her words dissolved in the cold air, answered only by the faint creak of broken doors and the sigh of dead trees. The forest nearby loomed like a dark sea, twisted branches clawing toward the sky. Legends spoke of shadows that moved beneath the leaves and ancient beings who watched from the darkness. Alara did not care for legends. Her stomach ached with hunger, her shoulders ached with weariness, and her heart ached with the weight of abandonment. The world had taken everything from her. She stumbled upon a path she had never noticed before, hidden beneath overgrown roots and moss. Something about it drew her, though she could not say why. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the small flicker of hope that had survived the long night of her sorrow. She stepped onto the path, the earth soft beneath her feet, and walked deeper into the shadowed forest. The air grew colder as she moved, and a faint mist rose from the ground. The forest seemed to breathe around her, its silence heavy and watchful. She shivered, hugging herself, but continued forward. She had no place to go, no one to protect her. Perhaps the forest would claim her, and that would be easier than facing the empty streets she had known all her life. Then, from the mist, a sound reached her ears. A deep, echoing voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Who dares enter the lands of the Northern King?" Alara froze. Her heart thudded violently in her chest. She knew the stories. The Northern King was no ordinary man. He was called Kale, the Alpha King, a ruler whose power was whispered about in every kingdom. Some said he commanded storms and shadows, that his anger could crumble mountains. The villagers had feared him even from miles away, and now she had wandered into his territory. I did not mean to," she stammered, her voice shaking. "I was only lost." The air around her shifted, and from the mist emerged a figure. He was taller than any man she had seen, with a presence that seemed to bend the light around him. His hair was dark as midnight, his eyes sharp and glinting like storm clouds. He wore a cloak that swirled with shadows, and his hand rested casually on the hilt of a sword that seemed more alive than metal. Kale's gaze fell on her, piercing yet not cruel. There was curiosity in his eyes, something that made her shiver not with fear but with awareness. He studied her like a storm studying the earth before it strikes. "You are small, yet you walk where others fear to tread," he said softly. His voice was commanding, yet strangely melodic, wrapping around her like a dark song. Alara lowered her eyes, afraid that looking up would reveal all her weakness. I have nowhere to go," she admitted, her voice almost breaking. I have no one in the world." Kale's expression softened imperceptibly, but a stormy intensity remained. He took a slow step toward her. "No one? That is a rare honesty. Most come to my lands thinking they have allies, yet they carry deceit instead. You are different." Alara lifted her gaze, and for the first time their eyes met fully. His gaze was unnerving, both powerful and intimate, like he could see every secret she had tried to bury. She felt exposed, yet strangely safe. It was a feeling she had not known in years. You are small, Orphan, Kale said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper, but the world is not small. It is cruel, yes, but it also has its strange, unexpected turns. You have wandered into the right place or perhaps the wrong one. Time will tell. Ilara's stomach twisted. She did not understand what he meant. She only knew that fear and fascination wrestled within her, leaving her breathless. Why do you speak to me so? She asked, her voice trembling. Why do you not strike me or send me away? Kale smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement playing on his lips. Because you remind me of someone I once was, or someone I wished I could have been. There is strength in you, though it is hidden beneath grief. I see it as clearly as I see the storm before it breaks. Ilara blinked, unsure whether to take comfort in his words or fear the weight behind them. I am nothing, she whispered. Just a girl who has lost everything. You are not nothing, Kale said firmly. He stepped closer, the shadows around him seeming to lean toward her. You are unclaimed, and that makes you rare. Most have chains, but you, Ilara, you are free. Her heart skipped. How did he know her name? She had never told anyone. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Kale studied her quietly for a long moment, the silence stretching like a taut rope between them. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo in the clearing itself, he spoke words that would change her life forever. You have no one, but now you have an entire kingdom. Ilara stared at him, disbelief and fear battling within her. A kingdom? You mean yours? Kale nodded slowly. Mine to give if you wish it. The lands, the people, the power, all of it. You could walk into a world that most only dream of, yet few survive. I offer it to you because I see what others cannot. You have the strength to rule, to endure if you dare. Ilara's mind reeled. Her life had been a series of losses, of walls closing in, of nights spent weeping under cold stars. And now a kingdom, responsibility, power. It seemed unreal, like a dream she did not know she wanted. I cannot, she whispered. I am not ready. I have never ruled anything. I barely know how to survive. Kale's eyes softened, but the intensity remained. Then perhaps it is not about readiness. Perhaps it is about courage. And you have courage in the smallest, quietest ways. That is why I offer this to you, because you are capable of more than you know, more than you believe. Ilara looked at the ruins of her village one last time, at the ashes of everything she had loved and lost. Her chest ached with longing and grief, yet something flickered within her, a tiny spark of hope, fragile and bright. Perhaps, she thought, there could be a place in the world for her after all. And if I refuse? She asked softly. Kale stepped back, his cloak billowing like storm clouds. Then you remain a shadow among the ruins, but shadows are fleeting and I do not like to wait. Ilara swallowed hard. Her heart pounded, fear and fascination warring in her chest. The offer was terrifying yet irresistible. She had nothing to lose and perhaps everything to gain. She glanced at Kale, whose stormy gaze seemed to pierce her very soul. I will try, she said at last, her voice trembling but firm. Kale's eyes glimmered with an unreadable emotion. Good. Then the first step begins tonight. The path to the throne is not gentle, nor is it forgiving, but if you survive, you may find more than power. You may find yourself. He extended his hand, dark and strong, and for the first time in years, Ilara felt someone reach toward her with certainty, not fear. She placed her trembling hand in his, and the cold, commanding grip felt like a tether to something larger than herself. The mist of the forest swirled around them, shadows stretching and bending as if the world itself held its breath. Ilara's heart raced. She did not yet understand the cost of what she had agreed to, nor the dangers that lay ahead. But for the first time, she felt that she was not entirely alone. The forest whispered once more, carrying her words into the night. I have no one in the world, yet perhaps, for the first time, I have a place to belong. Kale's voice followed her into the mist, low and certain. A kingdom waits, Ilara, and so does your destiny. The shadows of the northern lands closed around them, both protective and threatening, as the faint howl of something ancient stirred in the distance. Something watched. Something waited. And in that moment, Alara realized that the world had shifted beneath her feet, that her life would never be the same again. The journey to the northern palace was long and quiet. The forest seemed to lean toward them, shadows stretching like silent sentinels along the path. Alara's hand remained in Kale's, though her grip had loosened slightly, her mind spinning with questions she dared not speak aloud. The palace rose from the cliffs like a monument carved from shadow and stone. Towers reached into the clouds, windows glinting with the faint light of unseen torches. The air smelled of stone, smoke, and the faint tang of iron, a reminder of battles fought and won. For the first time, Alara felt the enormity of what she had agreed to. A kingdom, power, responsibility. Kale's steps were steady, confident, and unhurried. Behind his calm, however, she sensed a storm hidden in his thoughts. He led her through vast halls where portraits of kings and queens, long dead, seemed to watch her with quiet judgment. Every servant and guard bowed as they passed, yet all eyes flicked to her with curiosity, suspicion, or envy. "This place, it is larger than any village I have seen," Alara whispered. Her voice carried a mixture of awe and fear. "Larger, yes," Kale said softly, "and far older. Its stones remember everything, the triumphs, the betrayals, the pain. You will walk these halls carefully. Every choice you make will echo. Every word you speak may be remembered for a lifetime." Alara nodded, trying to absorb the weight of his words. She was not yet a queen, but already she felt the threads of power tugging at her. She had no knowledge of politics, no experience with diplomacy, and yet Kale had entrusted this to her. Why her, she wondered. And yet, when she looked at him, she saw a hint of something more than calculation in his eyes, a quiet recognition, as if he knew she could survive where others might falter. Their first evening in the palace was quiet. Kale led her to a small chamber that overlooked the cliffs, the wind whipping through open windows. The room was simple but elegant, with walls of pale stone and a few tapestries depicting the kingdom's past. For the first time, Alara allowed herself to breathe. I do not know what I am supposed to do," she said finally. Her voice was almost a whisper, carried away by the wind. Kale stepped closer, shadows clinging to his form like smoke. "You will learn," he said gently. "Power is not something you inherit without trial. It is something you earn through patience, through courage, through understanding. I will teach you." Alara's eyes widened. "Teach me, but you are the king. I am just me. I am not ready for any of this." "You are ready in ways you do not yet see," Kale replied. "Strength is not always visible. Sometimes it hides in fear, in grief, in the quiet moments when the world seems most against you. You have already endured more than most kings will ever know. That endurance, that is your strength." She wanted to argue, but words failed her. There was truth in what he said, and yet it frightened her. How could she wield a kingdom when she had not even mastered the shadows within herself? Over the next days, Kale guided her through the palace and the city beyond its gates. He introduced her to the council, men and women of power, all wary of this orphan turned there. Some smiled politely, others studied her with thinly veiled suspicion. Alara felt their gazes as a weight pressing down on her, and she realized that the kingdom did not simply need a ruler. It demanded a queen who could survive scrutiny, betrayal, and ambition. Kale walked beside her through it all, his presence a silent anchor. He did not speak often, yet every glance, every slight gesture carried meaning. The court could sense their bond, though none dared comment openly. There was tension in the air, unspoken and electric, a current that flowed between teacher and pupil, king and orphan. One evening, they stood upon a balcony overlooking the city. Lanterns twinkled like distant stars, and the wind carried the faint cries of the night. Alara shivered in the cold, and Kale draped his cloak around her shoulders, the fabric heavy with the scent of smoke and stone. "Why do you trust me?" she asked softly. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. Kale's eyes fixed on the horizon. "Because you are not like the others. You do not seek power for its own sake. You seek to survive, to endure, and perhaps to find a place in the world. That is rare, and because I see in you what I have long forgotten, a spark of hope." Alara felt a warmth she had not known in years. Her heart stirred, caught between longing and fear. She wanted to reach out, to touch the man who had offered her everything, yet she hesitated. Power and attraction intertwined dangerously. She was an orphan with nothing. He was a king who commanded fear and respect. And yet, her heart whispered that perhaps they were kindred spirits, bound by scars and loneliness. Their quiet was broken by the sudden sound of shouting from below. Soldiers ran through the streets, their armor clanging like distant thunder. Alara gripped the balcony railing as Kale's eyes darkened, storm clouds reflected in their depths. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tight with fear. "A threat," Kale said shortly. "The northern wilds have grown restless. The Shadowlands stir again." Alara frowned. "Shadowlands," he turned to her, his expression unreadable. "There are places in this world that remember old magic, old curses. They do not forgive easily, and they do not forget. Something ancient has awakened, and it will test us both." That night, as Alara tried to sleep in her new chamber, she could not escape the feeling of being watched. The palace was vast, full of hidden corridors and unseen eyes. Shadows moved with a life of their own, and whispers seemed to echo just beyond her hearing. Fear coiled in her stomach, yet it was tempered by the knowledge that Kale walked the halls too, a guardian as much as a teacher. The days that followed were filled with lessons in ruling, strategy, and diplomacy. Kale tested her patience, her courage, and her understanding. He pushed her to confront difficult decisions: how to allocate resources, how to handle dissent, how to command respect without cruelty. Each lesson was a mirror, reflecting both her strength and her fears. Alara began to understand that being a queen was not about glory or power. It was about responsibility, sacrifice, and understanding the hearts of those you lead. And with each passing day, she felt herself growing, her confidence blooming like a fragile flower in the shadow of the palace walls. Amidst the lessons, there were moments of quiet intimacy. They would walk the palace gardens in silence, the moonlight casting silver patterns on the ground. Kale rarely spoke of his past, yet sometimes he would allow a hint of softness to slip through, a fleeting smile, a shared glance, a hand brushing hers in passing. Each moment was fleeting, yet charged with an unspoken understanding. Alara felt drawn to him in ways she did not fully comprehend. He was commanding and enigmatic, frightening and fascinating. And yet beneath the power, she sensed a man shaped by pain and loss, much like herself. They were both survivors of a harsh world, both searching for something they had thought lost forever. But their growing bond did not go unnoticed. Whispers began to circulate through the court, some admiring, some jealous, some fearful. Not everyone welcomed an orphan in the halls of power, and not everyone believed she could withstand the pressures of leadership. One evening, as a crimson sunset painted the sky, Kale summoned Alara to the council chamber. The air was tense, the room filled with men and women whose faces were masks of polite curiosity. He spoke of the Shadowlands, of unrest in the northern territories, and of threats that could destabilize the kingdom. Alara listened intently, her mind racing. She understood now that the kingdom was fragile, and her role was far more than ceremonial. Her decisions would affect thousands of lives, and the weight of it pressed heavily on her shoulders. "Your Highness," a councilman said cautiously, "the shadows in the northern lands have grown bolder. They are rumored to take form, to test the courage of those who would rule. Perhaps it would be wise for the queen in training to remain in the palace until—" Kale silenced him with a sharp glance. "She will not remain idle. Alara has strength, and she will face what others fear. I will not hide her behind walls of fear while the kingdom trembles." Alara's heart pounded. Kale trusted her. He believed in her. And though fear gnawed at her, something fierce rose within her, the same fire that had carried her through the ruins of her village, through nights of hunger and despair. "I will do it," she said quietly but firmly. "I will face whatever comes." The council murmured, some doubtful, some impressed. Kale's eyes met hers, a storm contained in their depths, and he nodded once. "Then you begin tomorrow," he said. "And know this, the shadows do not forgive, nor do they forget. But you are not like the others. You may survive." That night, as Alara lay in her chamber, she felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. The lessons had been hard, the court's scrutiny relentless, and the world beyond the palace walls dangerous. Yet for the first time she felt the stirrings of purpose. She was no longer just an orphan wandering among ruins. She had a kingdom to protect, a destiny to claim, and a strange, undeniable bond with the Alpha King who had chosen her. But as she drifted toward sleep, a chill brushed her skin, and the shadows outside her window shifted unnaturally. Somewhere in the northern wilds something waited, something ancient, patient, and dark. And Alara knew, deep in her bones, that the true test of her courage and strength had only just begun. The northern wind howled through the cliffs, carrying a scent of rain, cold stone, and something far darker, something alive. Alara stood on the edge of the palace battlements, her cloak whipping around her as she stared toward the shadowed lands that stretched endlessly to the north. The Shadowlands were no longer stories whispered in fear. They had awakened. Beside her, Kale's presence was steady, a pillar of strength against the wind and the unknown. His cloak fluttered like a storm cloud, and his eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the horizon with alert precision. Though he had trained her, guided her, and challenged her through court lessons and council meetings, now the stakes were real. Danger lurked, not in whispers or intrigue, but in flesh, claw, and shadow. "You feel it, don't you?" Kale's voice cut through the wind. "The Shadowlands are stirring. They are testing us, testing you." Alara nodded, gripping the hilt of a sword she had learned to wield under his careful instruction. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her resolve did not. "I feel it," she said, "and I am ready to face it." Kale turned to her, his stormy gaze softened with something unspoken. "Courage alone will not be enough," he warned. "You must understand the shadows. Fear feeds them, doubt strengthens them. Only clarity and heart can guide you." Alara swallowed hard. Her mind raced with the lessons he had taught her, the importance of patience, strategy, and presence. Yet there was no rule book for this. No guide to tell her how to face a being born of darkness, an ancient curse that had waited for centuries to strike. "Then we go," she said, stepping forward, her voice steady despite the churn of fear in her chest. Kale nodded once, and together they moved down the battlements, the cold wind biting at their faces. The journey to the edge of the Shadowlands was silent, save for the crunch of stone beneath their boots. The closer they approached, the thicker the mist became. It coiled around the cliffs like living smoke, curling at their feet and swirling into shapes that disappeared before Alara could focus on them. Shadows moved within shadows, as if the darkness itself were watching, breathing, and waiting. Kale led the way, sword drawn, shadow magic shimmering faintly along its edge. "Stay close," he whispered, "and remember what I taught you. Fear is a weapon the shadows will try to use against you. Control it, bend it, do not let it bend you." Alara nodded, her heart pounding, her mind racing through every lesson he had given her. She remembered the quiet moments in the palace gardens, the whispered advice, the careful corrections when her steps faltered. Kale had not only trained her in power and leadership, he had taught her to trust herself. That trust now felt like a fragile flame against the vast darkness surrounding them. Then, from the mist, a low growl echoed, rolling across the cliffs like distant thunder. It was deep, unnatural, and full of hunger. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She had not seen the creature, yet she felt it, a presence that watched, studied, and waited. Kale's eyes narrowed. "It is here," he said quietly. "The shadow beast of the northern wilds. It has sensed us." The ground trembled slightly beneath their feet, and the mist shifted to reveal a form, tall, sinewy, and moving like liquid shadow. Its eyes glowed like cold fire, and its roar carried through the cliffs with a force that shook even Kale. Alara felt fear rise, unbidden, but she remembered his words. Fear could not control her. She planted her feet firmly, gripping her sword as the creature advanced. Its form was impossible to describe fully. It seemed alive and yet unreal, as if darkness itself had taken shape and learned to hunt. Kale stepped beside her, his sword raised. Shadows danced around him, thick and dark, feeding the edges of his power. "Stay close," he commanded. "And fight not just with your blade, fight with your mind and your heart. The shadow will try to twist your thoughts, to tempt your fear." The beast lunged with unnatural speed, and Alara felt her heart lurch. She swung her sword, guided by instinct more than skill, and the blade met resistance, not flesh, but darkness itself. A shiver ran up her arm as the shadow seemed to writhe, avoiding the strike with intelligence, with awareness. Kale attacked from another angle, shadows spiraling from his sword like liquid smoke. Each strike he made was precise, commanding, a dance of light and dark. Alara followed his movements, her fear tempered by the rhythm he set. She began to understand, if only barely, that courage was not absence of fear, but the choice to move through it. Hours seemed to pass in moments. The shadow beast attacked relentlessly, testing them, probing their limits. Alara's muscles ached, her lungs burned, yet she fought on. Kale remained beside her, a constant presence, guiding, teaching, and protecting. And in those moments, Alara realized something profound. She did not want to be protected. She wanted to stand, to fight, to be counted as equal in this battle. A sudden strike from the creature sent her sprawling, the cold stone cutting her palms. Pain surged, but she forced herself to rise, recalling the lessons Kale had impressed upon her: patience, clarity, and heart. She focused not on the fear, not on the pain, but on the bond they shared. The moment she did, the shadows around her seemed to shift, responding to her resolve. Kale's eyes met hers, and in that instant the unspoken bond between them became undeniable. They moved as one, sword and strength, mind and heart. The shadow beast recoiled under their combined effort, confusion flashing in its fiery eyes. Alara felt power surge through her, not just her own, but a connection with Kale, a force born of trust and understanding. With a final, coordinated strike, the beast let out a shriek that seemed to pierce the very air. It collapsed into the mist, dissolving into darkness, leaving nothing but an echo of its hunger. Alara fell to her knees, exhausted, shaking, yet alive. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done well," he said quietly. "Fear is the shadow's greatest weapon, and you have turned it into your strength." Alara's breath came in ragged gasps. I could not have done it without you," she admitted. Her eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment words were unnecessary. There was understanding, gratitude, and something more, a spark of something fragile and profound. Kale's gaze softened, the storm within him quieting just enough to reveal the man beneath the king. "No," he said, "you have done this alone. I merely guided. You discovered the courage you already had." For the first time, Alara allowed herself to see him as more than a king, more than a master of shadow and power. She saw the man who had endured centuries of command, who had built walls of fear around his heart, yet who now trusted her enough to let some of those walls fall. The victory was brief, though, for the night was far from over. From the northern cliffs, a howl echoed, darker and more terrible than before. The shadow beast had been a scout, a messenger. Something greater waited, patient and ancient, lurking just beyond sight. Kale's expression darkened. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The Shadowlands do not forgive, and they do not forget. They will come again, stronger, wiser, hungrier." Alara rose slowly, brushing stone dust from her cloak. Fear still lingered, but now it was tempered by something fiercer: resolve. She had faced the shadows and she had not fallen. She had felt the bond with Kale, the strength of trust, the power of courage. "I am ready," she said softly. "Whatever comes next, I am ready." Kale studied her for a long moment, shadows swirling around him like living smoke. Then he nodded once. "Good, because the true trial is yet to come, and it will demand not only strength, but the courage to face what lies in your own heart." Elara felt the weight of his words settle over her. She understood now that the battle was not only against the shadows outside, but the shadows within: fear, doubt, grief, and loneliness. She would have to confront them all or risk being consumed. As dawn broke, painting the cliffs with pale gold and silver, they returned to the palace, their steps heavy but certain. The kingdom awaited them, fragile and full of expectation. Elara knew that she was no longer merely an orphan wandering in ruins. She was a queen in training, a survivor, and someone who had begun to claim her place beside the Alpha King. And yet, somewhere in the northern wilds, the shadows waited. Ancient, patient, and unyielding. The first light of dawn broke over the northern kingdom, pale gold spilling across cliffs, towers, and forests. The palace, once shadowed and imposing, now glimmered in a fragile beauty, a reflection of the fragile peace that had settled over the land, however temporary it might be. Elara stood upon the balcony, the wind tangling her dark hair around her face. She had changed. The orphan who once wandered the ruins of a burned village now wore the mantle of authority with quiet confidence. Her eyes, once filled only with sorrow, now held clarity, a determination that had been forged in shadows, battle, and trust. Kale appeared beside her, silent as ever, but his presence felt less like a storm and more like home. The wind tugged at his cloak, and the faint shimmer of shadow magic clung to him, a reminder of the power he wielded and the battles he had fought. "You are different," he said softly, "stronger, braver, and yet still the girl who walked among ruins, carrying grief like a shield." Elara glanced at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "I am still that girl," she admitted. "But now I understand that strength is not in hiding from the world. It is in facing it, and in facing it with someone you trust." Kale's eyes softened, a storm breaking into sunlight for the first time in centuries. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "And I am learning that strength is not in solitude. It is in trust, in partnership, and perhaps in allowing myself to care again." The palace stirred with life. The council awaited them, the court bustling with whispers and cautious smiles. The northern wilds had quieted, the shadow beast retreating into legend once more. But the kingdom remained fragile. It would take wisdom, courage, and unity to rebuild fully. And Elara, though young and once afraid, was ready to step into her role. Their first council meeting together was quiet but powerful. Elara spoke with clarity and authority, her words measured and thoughtful. She addressed the concerns of the council with honesty, never pretending to have all the answers but showing the courage to make difficult decisions. The council, initially skeptical of the orphan turndare, listened intently. Even the most cynical advisors could not deny the quiet fire in her voice, the way she carried herself with calm determination, the way her presence inspired others rather than demanding fear. Kale watched from the side of the chamber, pride and something deeper hidden in the shadow of his gaze. She was growing into not only a ruler but his equal. Their bond, forged in fear and battle, had become a foundation of trust. Together, they were stronger than any single ruler could be. After the council, they walked through the palace gardens, the first sunlight warming their faces. The air smelled of blooming flowers and wet earth. Elara paused at a fountain, its water catching the light, and looked at Kale. "The shadows are quiet for now," she said, "but I know they will return. Something ancient still waits beyond the cliffs, watching, waiting." Kale nodded, his expression somber. "Yes. Darkness does not rest, And power, even ours, carries responsibility, but you have proven yourself. Together we can face it. Alara reached for his hand. This time she did not hesitate. Together, she said. Their peace, however, was not to last. A messenger arrived at midday, riding hard from the northern cliffs. His horse was covered in sweat and foam, his eyes wide with terror. "My lords," he cried, dismounting quickly. "The Shadowlands, they move. A darkness unlike any before spreads across the cliffs. Villagers report creatures taller than men, made of smoke and fire consuming forests and fields." The council erupted in panic. Kale's expression darkened. Alara felt her heart tighten, but the fear that gripped her was different from before. Now it was tempered by the strength she had earned, the lessons she had learned, and the bond she shared with Kale. "We go," Kale said, voice firm and unyielding. "You have led before. You will lead now. I will stand beside you as always." Alara nodded, her resolve steel beneath her fear. They mounted horses and rode toward the northern cliffs, the wind whipping around them, carrying the distant screams of the land under siege. The shadow beasts moved in waves, larger and more terrifying than before. Their eyes glowed with hunger and malice. Trees twisted and fell, and the cliffs trembled as the creatures advanced. Alara dismounted, her sword in hand. She turned to Kale, who stood beside her, his cloak flaring with shadow magic. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady. "I have never been more ready," he replied, his eyes locking onto hers. The battle began with a roar. Alara moved with precision, her blade slicing through shadows, her instincts guiding her. Each strike demanded courage, each decision demanded clarity. She felt the weight of her kingdom on her shoulders, the lives of her people tied to her every move. Kale fought beside her, a storm of power and strategy. Shadows bent to his will, weaving around them like protective shields and offensive strikes. Their movements became a dance, each aware of the other's presence, each guiding and protecting the other without need for words. Hours passed, or perhaps moments of time seemed to bend under the intensity of the battle. Exhaustion pressed on Alara, yet she did not falter. She had faced fear, faced grief, and faced loss. Nothing in her life had prepared her for this, yet everything had. She drew strength from Kale, from the bond between them, and from the courage she had discovered within herself. At last, the largest of the shadow beasts emerged from the mist, taller, darker, and more terrifying than any before. Its roar shook the cliffs, its eyes burning with ancient fury. Alara felt the fear rising, but this time it was not paralyzing. This time she faced it, acknowledging it and turning it into power. "Together," she said, voice clear and commanding. Kale nodded. Together, they advanced as one. Blades and shadow magic moved in harmony, cutting through darkness, deflecting fire and standing firm against the impossible. Alara felt her confidence swell. She had not only survived, she had begun to master her destiny. With a final, coordinated strike, the shadow beast collapsed into the cliffs, dissolving into darkness and mist. Silence fell over the northern wilds, broken only by the soft wind and the heavy breathing of the warriors. Alara fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "You have faced the shadows and you have not fallen." Alara looked at him, the adrenaline of battle still coursing through her veins. "We did it," she corrected. "Together." Kale's eyes softened, the storm within him settling into calm. "Yes, together," he murmured. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of trust, love, and shared strength. The kingdom would need rebuilding. The forests would need healing. The people would need reassurance. But for the first time, Alara understood that she could lead, not just as a survivor but as a queen, and that she would never be alone again. As they returned to the palace, the first rays of sunlight illuminated the land, revealing the beauty that had always been there, hidden beneath fear and shadow. Alara and Kale rode side by side, a partnership forged in fire, shadow, and trust. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, they stood together under the light of the rising sun. The air was still, and for a moment the world felt balanced. Alara looked at Kale, her heart full of gratitude, admiration, and a quiet, growing affection. "You were right," she said softly. "Strength is not just in power. It is in courage, in trust, in facing what we fear most." Kale smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting both pride and a rare warmth. "And love," he added almost as a whisper. "Even in the darkest times, love can be a guide if we let it." Alara took a deep breath. "Then let it guide us," she said, her hand finding his. The warmth of his grip reassured her, a promise that they would face the future together, whatever it held. The shadows may have lingered beyond the cliffs, waiting and patient, but within the walls of the kingdom, light and strength had taken root. Alara was no longer an orphan. She was a queen, a warrior, and a partner to the Alpha King. Together they had faced darkness and survived. Together they would shape a kingdom worthy of hope. And as the wind carried their laughter across the cliffs, the northern land seemed to sigh in relief. A new era had begun, one of courage, trust, and love, tempered in shadow and forged in fire.